Now in this lesson we're going to take a look at a feature that's been in Photoshop for quite some time, and it's called the threshold feature. Now I've used this feature for a number of different things. I've used it for various effects, adjustments, and even image effects, which is what we're going to take a look at here. And it's kind of an unsung hero because it really does give you some interesting results when you blend it with other features in Photoshop and textures and such. So let me just show you what I've got here. I've got an image of this jazz singer here, and it's a pretty good shot, but what I want to do is maybe make this part of a jazz poster or some kind of effect that I want to create as a background element or something. So in this case, the first thing I need to do is extract it from the background. The background is a little bit dark, almost blends a little bit with the, in some areas with the subject. So let's go ahead and get him extracted. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my quick selection tool. And in this case, I'm going to go ahead and start with the background. Oftentimes, if I find the background is more simpler to select than the subject, then I'll go ahead and do that and just inverse the selection. So I'll just make some adjustments here. Now, in this case, I'm actually removing it from the selection. So I'm holding down my Option key as I paint over areas, which seemingly is adding to the subject, but we're actually subtracting from the background selection, which is what we initially made here. All right, so that looks pretty good. So I'm going to go under the Select menu now and just go ahead and choose Inverse, and now my subject is selected. So that was much easier than painting around and trying to get the subject, because a lot of various tones in here. Now I'm going to zoom in because there's this little area of the background that's showing through there. So I'm actually going to go ahead and use my Magic Wand tool and just hold down the Option key, and you'll see we get the little minus symbol. And we'll just go ahead and take that area out of that selection right there. All right. So that looks pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and do Refine Edge and just clean up the selection here a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and use my Refine Radius tool here, and let's just brush over the hair area right here. And that cleans that up. And we've got some pretty jagged edges over here on this side over there. That looks pretty good. So I'm just going to clean it up. Doesn't need to be perfect. In fact, it got a little bit too much of the hair there. Now one thing you can do here is grab this Erase Refinements tool and then just brush back over certain areas. Now, unlike the Refine Radius, you'll need to paint over the whole thing to bring back most of the effect there. And one thing I'm going to do also is go ahead and boost up the contrast a little bit, and that'll tighten up the selection. Notice if I go too far, it gets it really close in there. I want to leave a little bit of soft edge on the hair and such like that. And I think that looks pretty good. All right, now I want to go ahead and extract this subject. I don't want to have to worry about a layer mask or any of those things. So in the output menu here, I'm going to go ahead and set this to, let's go ahead and do New Layer, and we'll go ahead and click OK. So there's my subject extracted from the background. Now what I want to do is go under the Image menu, and I don't need to worry about removing the color or anything like that. So I'm just going to go ahead and simply go to Image Adjustments, and we're going to go ahead and find Threshold. There it is. Now, the threshold feature couldn't be simpler. It's one slider and an input number. So if you know the number you want to input, you can input it there. But I just like to use the slider just to determine how much of the detail of the subject I want to see. Now, the detail, the contrast detail between light and dark areas is dependent on the image itself. If it's a largely overexposed image, you're going to see a lot more brighter areas, or white areas rather. And just the opposite, if it's really, really dark, you're going to see a lot more darker areas. But you really just got to move this slider around and see what you can get here. And actually, I think I'm going to move this to around 105. Looks pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and click OK. Now, sometimes if you zoom in, it tends to get a little bit sharp and choppy around certain areas, especially where there's texture and stuff like that in the skin. Now, there's a couple of ways to deal with that. Now, I'm going to undo what we just did there and show you one way. I'm going to go ahead and make a duplicate of the layer just so I don't have to go and extract again. But one way is, before you run the threshold, go to the Filter menu and go to Blur and choose Surface Blur. And what this does is it allows you to smooth out the detail in your image without affecting the edge detail. So we've made that texture and the skin tone a little bit softer by setting both settings to 10. And now I'm going to go and apply that threshold setting. And you'll see it's a little less prominent on that texture area right there. And I probably could increase that texture area a little bit, but it's going to make that a little bit softer. So that's one way to do it. Another way I like to do it is I'm going to go ahead and run that threshold like I did before and set this at around, was it 105 I like there, or something like that. Maybe a little bit higher, get a little bit darker areas, and about 110. I think that'll work pretty good. I'll click OK. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and lock the transparency so the edges remain unaffected with what we're going to do next here. And I'm going to go under Filter, go down to Blur, and choose Gaussian Blur. Now we're just going to give this a very small amount of blur here, just a 1 pixel blur. So I'll go ahead and do that and click OK. Now, I'm going to go and bring up levels here, and what we're going to do is use this to sharpen that contrast, and notice how that detail, that edge detail, that noise gets smoothed out quite a bit by making this levels adjustment there. So we're getting a little bit smoother graphic element there. That looks pretty good. So now what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and bring this into a texture, and let's go ahead and open up a texture I've got down here. There it is right there. I've already got it open. And so I'm just going to take this image and just drag and drop it on over to this layout here, or this texture image. And let's just go ahead and position it to the side here, so we're kind of creating a little composition here. Let's go ahead and minimize that. Now, to blend this with this background texture, we're going to do a couple of things. I'm going to scale this up a little bit so it's a little bit more in the scene there. There we go. It's like that. Now, to blend this, I'm going to do one thing. I'm actually going to change the blend mode of this layer from normal to multiply, and that's going to make all the light areas, or all the white areas, invisible, and let the texture show through, and then we just see the black. Now, I do want to see that texture a little bit kind of peering through those black areas, so I'm going to use the blend if feature in Photoshop by going into that layer and just double clicking on the layer itself. And here in the blending options, which is part of the layer styles panel, you're going to go down to the bottom here where it says blend if. Now, you have two sliders here for this layer and the underlying layer. Now what we want to do is bring the visibility of the underlying layer forward, and we want to do that with the lighter areas. So we'll go under underlying layer, and over here to the highlight slider, I'm going to hold down the option key and split this slider to smooth that transition. And as I move it over, you're going to start to eventually see the texture peer through, just like that. There we go. It looks a little bit better. So it really looks like it's blending in that scene. It's actually kind of got some wear and tear on the texture there. And there we have that. Now, I could go further and add another element to this by making a brush. Now, if I go and create a new document here, let's go ahead and make this, this is just kind of a little bonus tip here. Don't want it quite that big. Let's go ahead and make it just 500 by 500 pixels. And I'll go ahead and make the background white. There we go. Now I'm going to go ahead and get my shape tools, because in Photoshop you've got a collection of various shapes that are available here. And I just go ahead and just go to this pop-out menu and choose all, so I can see all the shapes at once, and just kind of scroll through here and see what's available. Now what I want actually is one of these musical symbols here. So I'm just going to grab this one right here, and let's go ahead and apply this as a shape. So I'm just going to hold down the Shift key and draw this out. And let's set the fill for this to black. Actually, let's go ahead and do it up here. There we go. And we'll put no stroke on that at all. So there's my musical note shape. So now I'm going to go ahead and define this as a brush. So I'm going to go under the Edit menu and go down here and choose Define Brush Preset. And let's go ahead and call it Music Note. And spell it right. There we go. So now that shape is defined as a brush. So now I'm going to go over here, and it should go ahead and select the brush. So if I start painting a little bit, so you can see there it is. Let's go ahead and actually change some of the behavior of the brush here. So I'm going to open up my brush options panel. And let's go into Shape Dynamics, and let's take the size jitter quite a ways up. In fact, let's go ahead and take it to 100. Why not? And we'll go to the angle jitter and pump that up all the way to 100 as well. And let's activate brush tip shape, and we'll just increase the spacing a little bit. And every now and then I'll just kind of do a little test brush here to just kind of see what I'm getting there. So I'm getting this musical note kind of dancing around the image. It looks pretty cool. But what I want to do actually is I want to have those notes kind of coming out of the saxophone here, but I want it to blend the same way it is on this layer. So I'm actually going to paint directly on that layer. But here's what I'm going to do differently. Notice if I select the layer and I paint on it, you'll only see, let me turn off the transparency lock there. There we go. So you'll only see the musical notes in the lighter areas. It blends with the black areas, but I want it to actually see it in the black areas as well as the lighter areas. So here's all you got to do. Just go into your brush blend mode menu. This is the tool blend mode, not the layer blend mode, and just change it to difference. Now, I'm going to set my brush color to white with it in difference mode, and if I start painting, notice how I get that kind of reverse effect on the subject there. So in those lighter areas, I'm getting that. And if I flip it around, then I get, so it's just a matter of flipping the colors, and you can just hit the X key over and over just to flip those colors around. But now when I'm painting with white, I get the musical notes blending in the dark areas, and when I'm painting with black, they're blending in the lighter areas. So just a little added effect to that by being able to go into Photoshop's shape features, draw the shape, and then define it as a brush and add it to a musical element to your images there. But pretty much that's how you take advantage of threshold. The many features that threshold, or many uses of threshold, this from a design perspective can give you some interesting results with the right kind of photo.